as Carolyn said, I worked for a year in Yemen at the MBI Jebel Foundation, the Emergent Media Institute in Yemen, and I was there between July 2013 and June 2014, and despite suicide bombings, drone attacks, national dialogue, it actually looks like I've missed the big stuff. Everything happened before and after. And as you've probably seen in the news, there's been a few things going on in Yemen, namely the Houthis look like they've taken over, and for me, my house in Yemen is next to Tahrir Square, and so seeing Abdul Malik al-Houthi on the big screen with thousands of Houthi supporters and militiamen in Tahrir Square chanting the good old death to America, death to Israel, was crazy from my perspective. I was quite shocked to see that, and that then feeds into what I'm going to be talking in this talk about, because obviously everything is mostly based on pre-Houthi takeover. And people are already talking about two eras in Yemen, that maybe we're now talking about post-Houthi and pre-Houthi. That's yet to be seen. But what I'm trying to say is that things could change hugely on what I say. So if anything I say proves to be completely false in the future, don't blame me and blame Yemen. So like I said, Yemen's entering a period of change, want to transition. And I don't know where it's going to go. And so the proliferation of private media, obviously we really had a power vacuum over the last few years in Yemen. And for me that was one of the main reasons for the emergence, or I suppose emergence would be the wrong word, but the proliferation, as we've said, of a private media in Yemen. The lack of a central authority who had the ability to force their will on everyone else and to ensure that what they say goes and that no one could criticise them, meant that you had this situation where different political groups, different people, different political opinions were able to say what they liked to a certain degree. The question is now, with the Houthi takeover, is that going to change? And that's yet to be seen. But one thing I would look at is what's already happened over the last few weeks. So what we have seen already, and I've got a pile of papers here, and I feel like one of those Arab journalists who come on Arab debate shows waving around piles of papers. But it's all attacks and documented by Reporters Without Borders of attacks over the last few weeks in Sana'a and prior to that. So one of the major ones was Suhail TV being taken over. So that's one of the main private TV channels that is pro the Islah Party and owned by Hamid al-Ahmad. And that was attacked during the Houthi takeover of Sana'a, and journalists were trapped inside, hundreds of journalists were trapped inside, and even led to one of the Houthis' main spokesmen, Ali Bukhaiti, coming out and saying that unless the Suhail TV was given back to the people, that he was an Islahi until you know, Islah are allowed to run, and he's a Suhail TV employee until Suhail TV are allowed to come back on air. That is in addition to the Yemen state TV buildings, which were attacked with heavy artillery. And again, hundreds of journalists being trapped inside. And so Reporters Without Borders themselves said that they strongly condemned the deliberate attack on the state TV broadcaster and Suhail TV. Prior to that, again, individual journalists, there's a case of Sayyid Muhammad Ahmed al-Hawari, who had a member of his family kidnapped, and he's a member of the Shamahi Media Foundation. He's a director of it. And, you know, because of his position, he had a member of his family kidnapped. You have Muhammad al-Ahmad, a photographer, who was well known in 2011 as one of the kind of the youth photographers, who again was also arrested by Houthis as he walked down in Sana'a on the 23rd of September. Homes have been searched and ransacked, so we've had homes belonging to various different political figures attacked and taken over. We've also had journalists who've had their homes taken over, and all of this obviously has a very negative effect on the media in Yemen. And it's not something that's just happened since the Houthi takeover. This happened in Amran, and the Houthis took over Amran, and everything like that. not to be bashing the Houthis too much, because what they're doing isn't exactly new in Yemen. Unfortunately, there's a history of attacks against the media. And the problem that exists in Yemen and still exists now is that as an independent voice, it's very hard to be heard, because everyone, essentially, if you say something that's counter or anti another group, you'll be perceived as being pro a certain other group. So if you say something anti-Houthi, you're an Islahi. If you say something anti-Islahi, or you're a Houthi, vice versa. The same with the Saleh fans and other. And it's so difficult, and I've seen it from some of my friends who try and present themselves as neutral, and it's impossible. Anytime they put up, say, a status on Facebook, and immediately whoever that status was against will then ignore the points they put across and simply say, oh well, you're a whatever, therefore you would say that. So, like I said, the Houthis aren't the only ones who've attacked journalists and the media. The BBC office in Sana'a, and it's run by Abdullah Warab, who is also affiliated with the MBI Global Media Institute. They have a armoured door that is like one of those wooden traditional kind of Yemeni doors, but it's actually, when you look at it, isn't wooden at all, but in fact metal, massive, and is extremely hard to open. And they've actually got a rope in the kitchen, in the office, which is the last kind of resort, which is, if anyone takes over the office, he climbs down the rope from, I think, the 5th floor of the building. And he's one of the guys who's been getting threats because of his position in the past from certain figures in the old regime. And the other side as well, Yemen Today, which is pro-Saleh, or owned by Ali Abdullah Saleh. And that was attacked over the last few months by Hadi and by people affiliated with the current government. And so we have these different attacks, and it doesn't exactly bode well for the media in Yemen if this is a continuous thing that has existed over time. Despite all this, we do have a vast increase in the number of private media outlets in Yemen. So when I was there and I'd be walking down the street, I used to walk down from Hadda, from up top of Hadda towards my house in Tahrir, which is a good hour and a half walk at times. And I used to kind of one of the things you notice in Yemen is you have newsstands like we have here, but they'll be laid out on a table in the street, and every newspaper will kind of be on flat on the table, and everyone just stops, looks at the newspaper, starts reading them. You can kind of flick them open. As long as you don't take the mic, you can get away with reading quite a bit of news without paying for anything. And what I notice is you'll have an anti-Saleh newspaper sitting next to something that's a headline screaming something about Abubakr Hadi, sitting next to something else screaming against Ali Mohsen, etc., etc. And for me, comparing that to certain other Arab countries, or maybe our close neighbours, wouldn't exist. And we have Arab newspapers based in London who can't do that, who can't speak out against someone who speak out against their owners or the country that backs them. And one of the things, actually, again, I saw in a BBC Arab report was there was a case of the Bais and Layla of Yemen and Saudi Arabia, which was basically this Yemeni lad who was living in Saudi, who managed to convince a Saudi girl to leave Saudi Arabia and come to Yemen for love. And so that obviously caused a massive storm in Saudi Arabia, kicked up a massive fuss, and the Yemenis loved it, because it was kind of one of those getting one over the neighbours, and they liked the idea. There was protests that came out into the streets, and they went, and all the youth revolutionaries went and supported this case of true love that they had to go and support. And when I looked at the papers that on the BBC report, you could see the first scene was just all these people reading the papers, and every single headline was something to do with, you know, Saudi Arabia, don't touch our girl. You know, this is true love, leave them alone. And this is just an interesting development that I'm not particularly sure we would have seen as widespread a couple of years ago. So to talk a bit about the main outlets, we have 90 newspapers that are published weekly in Yemen, which is quite a big amount when you think about it. 26 million, quite high numbers. The illiteracy rate, is quite high. And yet we have this huge amount of newspapers. They're different to the newspapers you'll find here. A lot of them are a lot smaller. There'll be nowhere near as many pages. There won't be these extra supplements or anything like that. But you know, they give, as I said before, a diverse range of opinions. And one I'd like to pick out. So Mustard Online and Murder Press. They initially started as websites. For me, Mustard Online is probably the most reliable Yemeni news website. It is attacked by, I mean, the Houthis, for example, now describe it as a pro-Islah outlet. For me, it's better than the most. It's not perfect, but it does, you know, it's my go-to source for Yemen news and for breaking Yemen news as well. Murder Press is definitely slightly more pro-Islah, but what I like about Murder Press is that it's quite modern in the way it puts across. So it has a lot of infographics. It does quite fancy headlines, quite nice designs in the newspapers. Again, another newspaper that's known for that is Al-Ula, who kind of pioneered the idea in Yemen of posting on Facebook your newspaper headline and your newspaper splash on the front cover, which were always, you know, really attractive. Even if you didn't agree with a lot of what they were saying, it would catch your attention straight away as soon as you saw it. Another one to mention is Al-Ayyam, which is based in Aden and one of the oldest Yemeni newspapers. And I'll come back to that one later on because it fits into a point I'd like to talk about a bit further on. Television, again, that for me, because private newspapers existed prior to 2011. Television is what's really changed in the years post 2011. Before we had Sana'a TV, which was Yemen State TV. We had Aden TV, which was Yemen State TV. We had Al-Iman, which was Yemen State TV. We had Saba, Yemen State TV. And now you have television channels like Asaida, you have Suhail, you have Yemen Today, you have Sahat, you have Azad. All these different channels are all owned by Yemenis or run by Yemenis. Not all of them necessarily based in Yemen. You have Aden Live and Al Nasira broadcast from Beirut. Aden Live, for obvious reasons, being that they're funded by Ali Salam, so therefore they can't be based in Yemen. Al Nasira, based in Beirut. You could talk about the kind of links with Hezbollah there. But you know, there's different TV shows that come on. You get the amount of channels that have emerged have meant that the entertainment scene in Yemen, for example, has now, you know, become better. The quality of the TV shows you see in Ramadan, or the quality of the comedy shows, people are now competing over entertainers, and it's benefited Yemeni entertainers, Yemeni journalists, Yemeni Yemeni celebrities, because of the opportunity for them to move across from channel to channel and to have a wider platform for them.